The ground where Colt's brother disappeared didn't look like a place that could swallow a life. It looked ordinary. A bend in the creek, a line of fence posts, a patch of grass grew a little greener where the water curved. Birds chattered in the cottonwoods. Sunlight flickered on the surface of the water. The only thing out of place was the tightness in Colt's jaw as he stared at the mismatched fence on the far side. "This is it," he said quietly. I stepped closer, boots sinking into the soft dirt near the bank, my shoulder aching in dull pulses. "This is where Luke rode last," Colt added, "and where Hart told everyone he just slipped." He said the last word like it burned his tongue. The creek gurgled, innocent, but the land around it felt heavy, as if it remembered. Earlier that morning, choosing to walk old ground, we left the hollow at first light. Colt insisted on walking part of the way instead of taking the wagon straight in. "Easier to duck off the path if we hear riders," he said. "And it does your shoulder good to move." I suspected it did his head good to move too. He'd been quiet the night before, turning the scrap of map from town over and over in his hands. The one with the creek bend and the words where fences don't match in Luke's handwriting, or something so close it felt like a ghost. "You don't have to take me," I said as we locked the old barn behind us. "You could go alone. Look, come back, tell me." His eyes met mine. "I told myself that for 2 years," he said, "that I could carry what I knew about this place alone. How'd that work out for me?" I didn't have an answer. "You're already in this," he added. "Hart made sure of that when he put a ring on your finger and a story in the town's mouth. If you're brave enough to run from him, you're brave enough to see where the rot starts." I swallowed. "Okay," I said. "We go together." He saddled the mare and helped me up behind him, as he had before. His hands were steady on my waist, careful of my sling. The contact was familiar now, not less electric, just less shocking. We followed a narrow trail that wound north, away from the hollow, threading between low hills and scrub. The air smelled of dust and wild sage. The sky was a wide and broken blue. After a while, Colt slowed the horse and slid down. "From here, we walk," he said, lifting his hands to help me down. "Ridge carries sound. Don't want hoofbeats giving us away if anyone's nearby." "Anyone like Hart?" I asked. "Or our quiet friend with the circle mark," he said. "We're not the only ones who come out this far." I slipped off the mare with his help, feet landing softly in the dirt. He tied the reins loosely to a low branch, giving the horse enough slack to graze. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm coming anyway." His mouth tugged at the corner. "Good," he said. "I'd be more worried if you weren't scared." The path narrowed as we approached the creek. Up close, I could see why this spot mattered. The creek curved in a lazy, shining loop, cutting its way between two low rises. On one side, the fence posts were older, weathered wood, wire sagging a little in places, the top of each post marked with an old branding iron symbol I recognized from my childhood. Whitaker, my family's name. On the other side of the creek, the fence looked different. Newer posts, straighter wire, posts set a few feet farther in than the old line. The branding on top was neater, sharper. "Hart, they overlap," I said quietly. "The lines," Colt nodded. "Used to be," he said, pointing. "The old Whitaker posts marked the edge of your daddy's land. Creek ran right alongside it. When the drought came and he signed that note, Hart started talking about adjustments. Said the creek wandered. Said the survey maps were imprecise." He took a step closer, boots crunching softly on gravel. "When Luke went missing," he added, "Hart made sure everyone understood it happened off Hart property." "Off," I repeated. He nodded. "If a man dies on Hart land, there's questions," he said. "Responsibilities. Wet ground. Liability, if you're a banker. If he dies on no one's land, well, accidents happen in the country." My stomach churned. "You think he moved the line?" I said slowly. "After Luke disappeared, to make sure the story fit." "I think he moved the line before," Colt said. "So if anything happened out here, he could claim it wasn't his problem." He gestured toward the old side. "Luke was fixing the sagging Whitaker wire when he rode out that morning," he said. "Hart told him to. Said he wanted all the land to look decent." Luke took it as a point of pride. "Said if we were going to work under him, we'd do it right." The way his voice softened on Luke's name made my chest ache. I stepped closer to the creek, careful of my footing. The water wasn't deep here, ankle high in most places, maybe knee deep where it curved. In spring, it probably swelled, but this time of year, no raging torrent. This couldn't have dragged a man away. I murmured. Not unless he was already unconscious. Or weighed down. Colt's jaw tightened. Hart said he slipped on the bank, he said. Hit his head on a rock. Rolled in. Current took him. Did they find a body? I asked. He shook his head once. Hat, he said. Caught in a snag downstream. A couple of scuff marks near the edge. That's it. I looked at the ground. The dirt here had been walked on by too many feet since then. Hart's riders, cattle, time. But still, I could feel something unsettled in it, like a story that had never been set right. I knelt carefully near the creek, using my good hand to steady myself. Easy, Colt said immediately, taking a half step forward. Bank's soft after last week's storm. You slip and I'm coming in after you. And I promise you, don't want to see what I look like when I'm wet. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my mouth. I'm not going to fall, I said. I just want to see where he was. You are not your father's fence crew, he muttered. But he stayed close, hand hovering near my elbow as I leaned over the water. Little stones glittered in the creek bed, bits of old branches, a rusted nail. I used to come down here as a kid, I said quietly. Before the notes, before Hart. Daddy would check the posts. I'd throw rocks. Mama always said this bend was good land, said it had heart. Colt made a soft sound. Heart, he repeated. Funny word to use about a place a man like Hart started eyeing. I reached down to touch the water. It was cool, clean. It rushed around my fingers and kept going, not bothering to care about who claimed the banks. Water doesn't know whose side it's on, I murmured. Land doesn't either, he said. Just knows the weight that's on it. I looked back up at him. How long were you and Luke working for Hart before this? I asked. He exhaled slowly, gaze drifting toward the mismatched fence, the hills beyond. Year and a half, he said, long enough to see the shine wear off. We moved back from the edge to a flat patch of ground between the two fence lines. Colt sank onto a rock, elbows on his knees. I sat on the grass facing him. Luke got restless first, he said. Always did. He liked motion, noise, big plans. When Hart offered us steady work, he thought it was the answer. Said we'd buy back our own luck if we worked hard enough. And you? I asked. I thought it was better than watching our daddy cough his lungs out trying to keep a dying cattle line afloat, he said. Hart talked pretty. Said he was building a future for the valley. Said men like us would stand taller with him. He picked up a small stone and turned it between his fingers. First few months it almost seemed true, he said. Pay came on time. Fences went up. Fields got cleared. Hart rode out, slapped backs, remembered names. What changed? I asked. The work got meaner, he said. Fence lines that didn't make sense. Orders to move posts a few feet this way, then a few feet that. A mistake on a map here, a convenient correction there. He flicked the stone into the creek. It skipped once, then sank. Luke didn't like it. Colt went on. Said land should stay where it was. Said if Hart wanted more, he should pay for it, not sneak it. He started asking questions, loud ones. My heart sank. Questions like, why this fence? Why this ridge? Why this creek? I guessed. Exactly. Colt said. He'd come home at night, slam his hat on the table, and say, Colt, I swear he's carving this valley into pieces that only fit in his pocket. He stared at the mismatched lines. One day, Luke rode out to check a section of Whitaker fence. He said quietly. Said Hart wanted the sagging wire fixed before Sunday, when some banker was coming through to see the improvements. I told him I'd go with him. He swallowed. I didn't, he admitted. I'd been up half the night fixing a busted gate. I was tired. I said I'd follow later. He laughed, said he'd race me to the ridge, and rode out ahead. There it was. The weight, the thing he'd been carrying. He never came back, did he? I whispered. Colt shook his head. Hours passed, he said. Sun got high. I saddled up, cussing him out in my head for dawdling. Rode out here. When I got to this bend, he pointed to a spot near the bank. Hart was already standing there, he said, hat off, face all heavy and sad. Two of his men behind him, holding Luke's hat like it weighed 100 pounds. My skin prickled. What did he say? I asked. He said there'd been an accident, Colt replied, voice clipped. Said Luke must have slipped fixing the fence. Said he never saw anyone hit the water so hard. He laughed bitterly. Funny thing was, he added, Hart's boots weren't wet. Neither were his men's. If they'd hauled my brother out, they'd have had mud on him. Water, something. They didn't. Did you ask? I breathed. Of course, he said. He told me he'd sent the men down, but the current had already taken Luke. That they were lucky to find the hat. He rubbed a hand over his face. I wanted to dive in, he said. Search every inch of that creek with my bare hands. Hart put a hand on my shoulder, told me it was too dangerous, that I'd only add to the tragedy if I went in after him. My throat burned. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He let out a slow breath. For a long time, he said, I believed him. Or, I tried to. Told myself I'd just been slow. That if I'd come earlier, I could have saved Luke. That the creek was the enemy, not the man on the bank. And now? I asked. Now, look at those moved posts, he said. At the ledger dates. At the other boys who vanished near new fences. And I think, he shook his head. You think it wasn't an accident, I said quietly. Or at least, you think Hart didn't mind if it happened. He met my eyes. I think a man who moves lines on paper won't hesitate to move them on the ground, he said. And that sometimes, people who stand in the way of those lines end up in creeks. If you've ever realized too late that the story you were handed about someone you loved doesn't match the ground they walked on, you know the way guilt and anger can tangle together until it's hard to breathe. If you want to hear what we find on that creek bank, and how it ties my forced engagement to Colt's brother's last ride, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss this next part. And tell me in the comments, have you ever believed someone's version of events, only to see later that the lines didn't quite match? I stared at the water, at the fence, at the lines that didn't match, and my own story rose like something I'd been swallowing for too long. I said yes, I blurted. Colt blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. To Hart, I said. When he asked me to marry him, I said yes. He watched me quietly. You don't owe me an apology for that, he said. I'm not apologizing, I snapped. I'm confessing. Everyone keeps talking about how I ran and how I ruined his big day. But nobody asked why it got that far. Why did I let it? He didn't speak. He just waited. It wasn't one moment, I said. It was 1,000 tiny ones. Years of them. Daddy was coughing over the kitchen table, trying to add up numbers that didn't make sense. Letters with Hart's letterhead, folded neatly, saying words like deferment and foreclosure. My hands shook. He started coming by more. I went on. At first, with baskets, flour, coffee, beans. Said he couldn't stand to see good people go hungry. Mama cried with gratitude. Daddy tried to refuse, but Hart insisted. I laughed bitterly. Then it was favors, I said. I'll have my men fix that fence for you, Whitaker. I'll cover that vet bill this time. Don't you worry about that note. We'll push it to next season. Every time he said, I'll take care of it, the hook went deeper. Colt's jaw flexed. When Daddy started getting worse, I said, Hart started hinting, saying things like, once Rose is settled, you won't have to worry about her. A good husband could take this weight off your shoulders. My throat closed. Then one day, I whispered. He didn't hint. He took my hand in the office, closed the door, and said, marry me, and your daddy never has to see another letter with a due date. Colt's eyes darkened. I stared at my shaking hands. I wanted to say no, I said, so bad. Every part of me was screaming, but Daddy was in the next room, coughing up blood. Mama was in the kitchen, counting coins, and Hart kept talking about how he'd save the ranch and give me a life beyond worry. I swallowed hard. So I said yes, I whispered, because I thought if one person had to be trapped to save everyone else, it should be me. Tears blurred the creek. Colt shifted, moving from the rock to sit beside me on the grass. You didn't trap yourself, he said quietly. He did, I agreed. I insisted. I walked into that church. I let them put that dress on me. I let them put that ring on my finger. You agreed under duress, he said. That's not a choice. That's survival. My voice cracked. I kept telling myself I'd learn to live with it, I said. That maybe he wasn't so bad. That I was being dramatic. That other women had it worse. Every time he put a hand on my back a little too long, or called me girl instead of my name when we were alone, I told myself I was overreacting. I looked at him, vision swimming. When he pinned me against the office wall 2 weeks before the wedding and called me pretty little prize, I still didn't say no. I choked out. I froze. I laughed it off. I told myself I'd make it work. The words spilled faster now, like a dam breaking. It wasn't until the morning of the wedding, I said, when Mama was tightening my corset and Daddy kept thanking Hart for saving us, that it hit me. I wasn't walking into a marriage. I was walking into a cage. My whole body shook. I ran late, I whispered, panicked. hid in the barn, prayed for a sign, any sign. I looked at him. And then you opened the door, I said. His eyes softened with something that made my chest ache. You were the sign, I finished. You didn't know it, but you were. For a long moment, we just sat there. The creek murmured. A bird called. Somewhere, far off, a cow lowed. Colt reached over, slow and careful, and took my good hand in his. Not possessive, not claiming, just steady. You didn't let him do anything, he said softly. You survived a situation that was stacked against you from the start. That's not a weakness. That's strength. Tears spilled over, hot against my cheeks. I feel stupid, I choked, for taking so long to see it, for needing a torn dress and a canyon to finally admit I didn't want him. He shook his head. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked. What? I whispered. A woman who stood on the edge of a cliff and chose the unknown over a known prison, he said. That takes more courage than most cowboys I've met. My fingers curled around his. And you know what I see when I look at Hart? He added. A man who thinks adjusting fences and signing papers gives him the right to adjust people's lives like furniture. That's not a strength. That's cowardice wearing a nice vest. A wet laugh broke out of me. You really don't like him, I said. I don't like what he turns this valley into, Colt said. I don't like how he talks about you. About Luke. About anyone whose story doesn't fit on his ledger lines. He squeezed my hand gently. And I don't like the way he made you feel like you owed him your life for something he did to your father, not for him, he said. Your life is not a payment plan, Rose. I swallowed hard. What if it's too late? I whispered. For Luke, for Daddy, for this land, for my name. It's not too late for you, he said firmly. And as long as you're breathing, it's not too late to tell the truth about the rest. We sat there until my tears slowed. When I could breathe without my chest hitching, Colt let my hand go and pushed himself to his feet, brushing dust from his jeans. Come on, he said gently. Let's see what else this place remembers. We walked the fence lines together. On the Whitaker side, he showed me the old brand marks burned into the tops of the posts. Weathered, cracked, but still there. On the Hart side, the posts were newer. The spacing was slightly off, but you had to know what you were looking at. You see it? He asked. See what? I said. Count the steps between posts, he said. On your daddy's side, they're even. Man with a measuring eye. On Hart's, some are closer, some farther. He wasn't trying to be precise. He was trying to be persuasive. Persuasive? I echoed. To anyone glancing, he said. Not anyone who knows the land. As we walked, something bright caught my eye near the base of one of the newer posts. What's that? I asked. He followed my gaze, crouched, and brushed the grass aside. A small piece of metal gleamed dully in the dirt. He picked it up, wiped it on his shirt, and turned it so the light hit it. A belt buckle. Not fancy, but with a distinctive pattern etched into it, 2 intertwined letters. LM. My breath caught. Luke Mercer, I whispered. Colt stared at it like he'd been punched. I thought he was buried in this ground in a dozen ways, he said hoarsely. Didn't think one of them would still be shining. His thumb traced the letters. I watched him carve that pattern into scrap metal one winter, he murmured. Said one day he'd wear it when he rode fence on land that was ours again. He closed his eyes for a second. When Hart told me they didn't find anything but the hat, he said, he lied. I swallowed. You think he kept this on purpose? I asked. Or just didn't look? He exhaled. I don't know, he said. But the fact that it's on the Hart side of the line now, under one of his new posts, that's saying something. My skin prickled. Do you think the second rider left it there? I asked. Colt turned the buckle over. On the back, scratched in shallow lines, was a small symbol. A circle with a slash through it. Oh, I breathed. Colt shook his head, a rough laugh breaking out of him. That's Luke's mark, he said. He used to tag his tools with it. Said it meant, nothing's as simple as it looks. So whoever left the button, and the note, and marked the notice. I said slowly, they're using his symbol on purpose. To talk to me, Colt said quietly. Or to anyone who remembers. A prickle ran down my spine. Do you feel that? I whispered. He looked up. Feel what? He asked. Like, we're being watched, I said. He went still. The creek kept murmuring. The birds kept calling. But under it all, the air felt aware, like the land itself was holding its breath. Colt slipped the buckle into his pocket and scanned the ridgelines. Stay close, he murmured. We moved back toward the more open ground, where we could see farther. That's when I saw it. On the far rise, Half hidden behind a cluster of scrub, a horse stood silhouetted against the sky. A rider sat slouched in the saddle, hat low watching. Colt, I breathed. Up there. He followed my gaze. The rider didn't move, didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched. Is that Hart? I asked, heart pounding. No, Colt said, wrong posture. Hart sits like he owns the air. This one's smaller, leaner, more patient. The second rider? I whispered. Maybe, he said. For a moment, no one moved. Then the rider raised a hand, not high, just a small gesture, a line drawn in the air. They pointed, downstream, toward a curve in the land we couldn't see yet. Then, as quietly as they'd appeared, they turned their horse and slipped behind the rise, disappearing. Should we follow? I asked, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. Not directly, Colt said. If they wanted us to follow their exact trail, they'd have come closer. This is a nudge. A nudge where? I asked. Downstream, he replied, where the creek bends again. We followed the creek downstream, staying on the Whitaker side at first, then crossing where the water narrowed and rocks made stepping stones. The land dipped, then rose, forming a small hollow out of sight from the first bend. Here, the air felt different, still, heavy, like sound. Didn't want to stick around. The creek carved a deeper channel here, undercutting part of the bank. Roots jutted out, exposed and tangled. At the base of the slope, half buried in mud and grass, something pale glinted. Colt crouched, jaw tight. Stay up there, he said. What is it? I asked, heart in my throat. He didn't answer right away. He brushed away more dirt. Bone, not a full skeleton, just pieces. A long, curved fragment that might be a rib. A smaller, thicker piece with a rounded end. My stomach lurched. Is that? I couldn't finish. He studied it with a practiced eye. Hard to say for sure, he said. Could be an animal, could be, not. Creek beds collect everything. He kept brushing. Something else emerged. Not bone, metal, a length of chain. Rusted, but still linked. At one end, a broken shackle like loop. He held it up, mud dripping. What kind of slip accident needs a chain? He asked quietly. My skin crawled. Colt, I whispered. What if? I know, he said, voice low, tight. I know. He looked at the undercut bank, at the chain, at the bones, at the way the creek had eaten away just enough to reveal them now. Years after Luke disappeared, somebody secured something here, he said. Or someone, long enough for the water to do the rest. That's not an accident, I said. No, he replied. We stood in a silence that felt loud. Far off, a crow called. The whole valley felt like it was listening. Colt wrapped the chain loosely, tucking it and the buckle into his saddlebag when we made our way back to the horse. The second rider wants you to see this, I said quietly. Or wants us to know it exists, he said. Either way, this is more than whispers now. Will Cade believe it? I asked. If we show him, he'll have to look, Colt said. A sheriff can ignore gossip. Can't ignore bones and chains and a moved fence over an old ledger. We started back toward the hollow, staying off the main trails, cutting across open ground where we could see anyone approaching. For a while, the only sounds were the creak of leather and the soft clop of the mare's hooves. Then, faint at first, we heard something else. Hoofbeats, multiple, coming from behind. Colt tensed, slowing the mare just enough to listen. Too many for one lone rider, he murmured. 4, maybe 5. Search party? I whispered. Could be, he said. Could be Hart's men widening their circle as he promised. What do we do? I asked. He scanned the land ahead. The ridge, he said. We get up there. We can see who it is and whether we need to run or just not be seen. He nudged the mare into a faster walk, then a careful trot, angling us toward a low rise with rocks we could use for cover. Behind us, the hoofbeats grew louder. Men's voices drifted on the wind. Heard someone saw Mercer out this way. Hart wants eyes on that creek bend. What if he's hiding her there? My blood ran cold. They're talking about you, I whispered. And about you, Colt said calmly. Hang on. We reached the ridge and slipped behind a cluster of boulders, Colt sliding off first, then helping me down. He led the mare into the partial shelter, murmuring to keep her quiet. We crouched behind the rock, peeking through a narrow gap. Below, on the lower trail we'd just left, 4 riders appeared, 3 in Hart's colors. 1, Cade. My heart thudded. Hart wasn't with them, but his shadow was. I told him I'd check the bend, Cade was saying. Doesn't mean I am dragging Mercer back by his ears if he asks looking at water. Boss says Mercer's acting strange, one of the Hartmen replied. Says he might be confused too. Funny, Cade said dryly. Confusion seems to follow your boss around more than other men, one of the riders snorted. Watch yourself, Sheriff, he said. Jobs go to men who know which side they're on. Cade didn't answer. They rode past the turn that led up to our ridge, heading straight toward the creek bend we'd just left. Colt's hand found mine again, grounding. They're riding into our footprints, I whispered. Yeah, he said quietly, which means from here on out, every step we take has to be twice as careful. He looked down at where his saddlebag bulged with chain and buckle. And Hart's men, he added, are about to stand in the same spot where we just pulled the truth out of the ground. I swallowed hard. What if they find it? I asked. They won't, he said. We took enough to prove something, and left enough buried that only the land and whoever left those marks know the whole of it. We watched the riders disappear over the next rise. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of smoke from somewhere we couldn't see yet. I didn't know then that by the time we made it back to the hollow, that smell would be thicker. That Colt's cabin in the canyon, his lonely, quiet, safe place, would be glowing on the horizon for all the wrong reasons. But I could feel something coming. A storm that wasn't made of rain this time. When I ran from Hart Ranch, I thought I'd left all my ghosts behind me. Today I knelt by a creek that used to be my childhood playground and watched Colt pull his brother's buckle and a length of rusted chain out of the mud, on the wrong side of a fence that shouldn't have been there. We both told the truth we'd been carrying alone, about a brother who slipped, about a bride who said yes. And above us, a quiet rider pointed us to the spot where the land finally started telling its own story. Now Hart's men and Cade are riding into that same bend, and the smell of smoke is starting to ride the wind from somewhere near home. If you want to know what happens when we follow that smoke back to the canyon, and what burns when Hart realizes we've been walking the same ground as his secrets, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss episode 7 Danger on the Ridge. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my boots, would you take those bones and chains straight to Cade right now? Or wait, watching Hart move, until the proof is too heavy for him to lift?